It's
Do
good
you
to
even
be
know
here
what
tonight.
tango is? Or do you only know how to wipe tables? Mocking laughter filled the hall as every eye turned toward the young waitress. Phones pointed at her, ready to record her humiliation. But when the Arab billionaire sneered, "If you can dance tango, I'll marry you right here," she simply stepped onto the floor. The music swelled, and in an instant, her flawless tango steps left the entire hall in stunned silence. Sofia stood at the edge of the banquet hall, her hands steady on an empty tray, her plain black uniform slightly creased from a long shift. She was 23, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. No makeup, no jewelry, just a quiet beauty that didn't beg for attention. Her eyes held a steady fire like she had walked through storms and learned to stand taller because of them. The five-star restaurant in Dubai glittered under crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed tables gleaming, the air heavy with expensive wine and perfume. The guests were the city's elite, men in tailored suits, women in gowns that shimmered like light itself. Sofia had been working here for months, saving for tuition, dodging sharp glances from people who saw her faded shoes and assumed she was nothing. Tonight, though, the air felt heavier. She wasn't just a waitress to them, she was a target. Sofia moved through the crowd, her tray loaded with champagne flutes, her steps quick but careful. She'd learned to keep her head down to avoid the eyes of guests who treated her like she was invisible or worse. As she poured wine for a table of businessmen, one of them, a heavy-set man with a gold watch, leaned back in his chair. "Careful, sweetheart," he said, smirking. "That bottle's worth more than your entire year's salary." The others chuckled, their eyes flicking over her like she was a prop. Sofia didn't flinch. She finished pouring and moved on. A woman at the next table, her height piled high, noticed Sofia's movements and scoffed. "Look at her pretending she belongs," she said loud enough to carry. "She's probably never even been to a place like this as a guest." Her companion laughed. "Bet she's counting her tips to buy better shoes." Sofia paused just for a second, her fingers brushing the edge of her tray. The woman's friends joined in, their laughter sharp like knives. Sofia kept moving, her shoulders squared slightly. The laughter spread. A man in a crisp white suit joined in. "Look at her shoes," he said, pointing. "Did you borrow those from your grandma?" The table roared, feeding off each other's cruelty. Another woman, younger with an influencer vibe, leaned forward, phone already in hand. "Honey, you're in the wrong room," she said, dripping with fake pity. "The staff entrance is that way." The laughter grew sharp and relentless. Another guest piped up as Sofia passed. "Careful not to trip. You're not exactly graceful, are you?" His friend mimicked her walk, exaggerating it into a clumsy stumble. Sofia's steps didn't falter, but her jaw tightened. A woman in a red gown whispered loud enough for Sofia to hear. "Why do they even let people like her in here?" Her companion shrugged. "They must be desperate for help." As Sofia refilled a water pitcher, a young man in a flashy blazer watched her. He turned to his table. "Bet she's dreaming of being one of us," he said, grinning. His friends laughed, one snapping a photo of Sofia's back. "Post that," a woman urged gleefully. "Caption it, 'Dreams bigger than her paycheck.'" They erupted, phones out, some typing, others zooming in on Sofia's plain uniform. The band shifted gears, soft strings giving way to a bolder rhythm, a tango pulsing and alive. A man in pinstripes muttered, "This kind of music, it's not for people like her." He nodded toward Sofia, who was clearing glasses nearby. The Arab billionaire seated at the head of the largest table noticed. His name was Rashid, a man in his 40s, his black suit tailored to perfection, his keffiyeh draped with casual arrogance. He was known for turning every room into his stage, his wealth a weapon he wielded with a smile. Rashid raised a hand, signaling the band to play louder. The tango swelled, its rhythm sharp and commanding. His table buzzed with whispers, but no one moved to the dance floor. Sofia, standing near the edge of the room, glanced at the empty floor. Just a quick look, but Rashid caught it. He stood and waved a hand. "Let's see who dares," he said, his voice carrying over the music, smooth and taunting. The hall turned, every eye following his gaze straight to Sofia. She froze, caught in the spotlight of 100 stares. The businessman with the gold watch spoke first. "What? You think you can dance, waitress? Do you even know what tango is, or do you just wipe tables? The table roared with laughter. The influencer woman chimed in, phone already recording. Oh, this is going to be good. If she tries to dance, she'll fall flat on her face. Others joined in. Go on, try it, a man shouted, voice slurred from wine. This will be the best comedy of the night. A woman with a sleek bob leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You're embarrassing yourself just standing there. Why don't you stick to serving drinks? The room laughed, sharp and cruel. Another guest slapped the table. Bet she's never even heard of tango. Probably thinks it's a fruit or something. The laughter grew louder, turning Sofia into the evening's entertainment. Sofia set her tray down on a nearby table, her movement slow and deliberate. She smoothed her uniform skirt, then stepped forward, one step, then another, toward the center of the floor. The hall erupted in gasps and murmurs. She's actually doing it, a woman whispered. This is going to be a disaster, another muttered, raising his phone. The spotlight swung to Sofia, harsh and unforgiving, bathing her in white light. But her face stayed calm, her eyes steady. She stopped in the middle of the floor, alone, the music pulsing around her like a heartbeat. A man in a velvet blazer called out, Go back to the kitchen, sweetheart. This isn't your stage. The influencer woman zoomed in. This is going viral for all the wrong reasons. Another guest leaned toward her companion. She's making a fool of herself already. Look at that outfit. She doesn't belong here. Rashid laughed louder than anyone. He strode to the edge of the dance floor, his presence commanding the room. If you can truly dance tango, he said, his words booming, I'll marry you right here. The hall exploded in laughter, cruel and unrelenting. The socialite woman clapped her hands, delighted. Yes, let's see this waitress make a fool of herself. Sofia's lips pressed together just for a moment, and her eyes met Rashid's. There was no fear there, no hesitation, only a quiet, burning defiance that seemed to catch him off guard. The music hit a crescendo, the tango's rhythm sharp and commanding like a challenge thrown down. Sofia lifted her chin, her posture shifting, shoulders back, spine straight, like she was stepping into a different version of herself. She took a single step, her foot sliding across the polished floor with a grace that made the room catch its breath. Then another step, fluid and strong, her body moving in perfect sync with the music. The laughter died, replaced by a stunned hush. Her plain uniform seemed to vanish, her movements carrying a power that filled the space. Each step was deliberate, each turn precise. Her arms extended with a confidence that silenced the room. The guests leaned forward, their eyes wide, their phones still raised but forgotten. And Rashid's smile faded. He stood frozen, watching as Sofia danced alone under the spotlight. The music built, and she matched it, her steps weaving a story of strength and control, each movement a quiet rebuke to the room's cruelty. A few guests whispered, voices shaky. Who is she? One woman asked, wine glass trembling. The businessman with the gold watch shifted in his seat, his smirk gone. The influencer's phone lowered slightly, her mouth open, her perfect facade cracking. Sofia's dance wasn't just good. It was masterful, a performance that belonged on a world stage, not in a room full of mocking strangers. As Sofia turned, her skirt catching the light, a man in a corner booth leaned forward. This is a fluke, he muttered, hands clenched around his whiskey glass. She's probably some hired performer planted here. His table nodded, grasping at any excuse to dismiss her. Sofia's steps didn't falter, but her eyes flicked toward the booth for a split second, a spark of defiance flashing before she spun again, her movement sharper, as if answering their doubt with every precise step. The hall was quiet now, only the music and the soft tap of Sofia's shoes against the polished floor. She spun, her skirt flaring slightly, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. A memory flickered in the air. Years ago, in a small apartment, she danced with her mother, the radio crackling with a tango's rhythm, the two of them laughing as they moved across a worn rug. The memory passed unspoken, but it hung there in her grace, in the way she carried herself, like she was dancing for someone who wasn't in the room anymore. A man's voice broke through, sharp and desperate. "Impossible!" he shouted, his face red. She must have practiced this somewhere. Some cheap studio. The socialite woman nodded, clutching her pearls. Even if she dances well, she's still just a waitress. Others joined in, their voices thin, grasping at their fading superiority. She's no artist, another man scoffed. Just a fraud. But their words fell flat, drowned out by the power of Sofia's movements. Each step, a quiet defiance. Each turn a reminder that she didn't need their approval. A new voice cut through the noise. A woman in a sleek blazer, a journalist, stepped forward, her phone out, scrolling furiously. She'd been quiet all night, watching from the sidelines. "Wait," she said, her voice rising over the music. She held up her phone where a grainy video played on a loop. "This is her," the journalist said, her voice shaking with disbelief. She turned to the giant screen at the front of the hall. There was Sofia, younger, her hair longer, dancing in a competition hall, her name flashing across the bottom. Sofia Martinez, two-time international tango champion. The room gasped, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Old photos appeared on the screen. Sofia in a simple black dress holding a trophy, her mother beside her, frail but smiling. Another video showed her at 19, her steps just as flawless, moving through a crowded stage with a partner who could barely keep up. The journalist kept talking. "She quit dancing to take care of her sick mother," she said, pointing at the screen. "She's been working odd jobs ever since, paying hospital bills." A newspaper clipping flashed up. "Star tango prodigy steps away to save family." The mockers' faces paled, their eyes darting to Sofia, who was still dancing, oblivious to the screen behind her. A man in a pinstriped suit stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "This changes nothing," he declared, voice trembling. "She's still serving tables, not sitting at them." A woman beside him pointed at the screen. "Those videos could be fake," she said desperately. "Anyone can edit a clip these days." Sofia's dance continued, her movements unbroken, but her hand brushed her bun, loosening a strand of hair that fell across her cheek. She tucked it back and kept dancing, her silence louder than their protests. The music slowed and Sofia's movement softened, her final sequence unfolding like a story coming to a close. She finished with a single step, her foot sliding to a stop, her chest rising and falling, her eyes locked on nothing in particular. The music faded and the room stayed silent, the weight of their shame settling over them. The businessman looked away, hands fidgeting. The influencer slipped her phone into her bag. Her perfect smile gone. The socialite woman stared at her wine glass, her fingers trembling. Rashid stood at the edge of the floor, his jaw tight, his eyes no longer mocking but serious, almost searching, like he was seeing Sofia for the first time. A man in the back shouted, voice cracking with desperation, "She's still unworthy of an Arab billionaire." A few others nodded, their voices weaker now, clinging to their pride like a lifeline. Sofia didn't move. She stood there, her hands at her sides, her gaze steady, meeting his eyes without flinching. The silence stretched, the room frozen until a soft clink broke it, a waiter dropping a spoon in the corner, his hands shaking as he watched. Another memory flickered, a hospital room years ago, her mother's hand in hers, the beeping of machines, the faint hum of a tango playing on a nurse's radio down the hall. Sofia had sat there night after night, her dance shoes tucked away, her dreams on hold. The memory passed, and she straightened, her chin lifting slightly. Rashid stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate. He reached up, removed his keffiyeh, and held it in one hand, the fabric dangling loosely. Then he started clapping, a slow, steady rhythm that echoed in the silent hall. "In a room full of show-offs," he said, his voice clear and calm, cutting through the tension, "only you dared face me with true talent." He paused, letting the words sink in, his eyes locked on Sofia's. The room shifted. Ian. Few guests gasping, others leaning forward. He bowed slightly, his hand extended toward her. "Dance with me," he said, not a challenge, but an invitation, his voice softer now, almost reverent. As Rashid extended his hand, a woman in a green dress stood abruptly, her chair tipping slightly. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, loud enough to draw eyes. "She's playing you all. She's just a server who got lucky with a few lessons." Sofia's eyes flicked to the woman just for a moment, and she tilted her head slightly, a gesture so subtle it was almost invisible. Then she turned back to Rashid, her hand resting in his, her posture calm but unyielding. Sofia didn't smile. She didn't blush. She nodded once, a small, deliberate movement, and took Rashid's hand. The music started again, softer this time, the tango's rhythm gentle but commanding. They danced, Rashid moving with skill, but Sofia leading subtly, her steps guiding him, her presence filling the floor. The guests watched, some with tears in their eyes, others with their heads bowed, their earlier laughter now a distant memory. The businessman with the gold watch slipped out of the room, his face red. The influencer's phone stayed in her bag, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The socialite woman drained her wine glass, her fingers shaking. The dance continued, Sofia's movements fluid and sure, each step a quiet declaration of who she was. The room's energy shifted, the guests no longer mocking, but watching, some standing, others whispering in awe. A woman in a blue dress clutched her husband's arm. "We were wrong," she whispered, barely audible. Her husband nodded, his eyes on Sofia, his jaw tight. Another guest, a man with gray hair, stood and began clapping, slow at first, then louder, until the room joined in, the applause growing into a thunderous wave. Some guests wiped their eyes, their shame mixing with admiration, their earlier cruelty exposed under the weight of Sofia's truth. As Sofia and Rashid moved across the floor, a young server, barely 18, stood frozen near the kitchen door, his tray shaking in his hands. He'd seen her every shift, quiet and steady, taking the guests' jabs without a word. Now, watching her dance, he stepped forward and clapped, his hands trembling. Other staff joined in, their applause soft but growing, a quiet rebellion against the room's cruelty. Sofia didn't look at them, but her steps grew sharper, her movements carrying a new intensity, as if she felt their support lifting her higher. The music faded and Sofia and Rashid stopped, their hands still clasped for a moment before she stepped back. She didn't bow, didn't smile, just stood there, her chest rising and falling, her eyes steady. Rashid looked at her, his expression unreadable, then nodded once, a gesture of respect. The room stayed quiet for a long moment, the applause dying down. Sofia turned, her movements calm, and walked back to her tray, picking it up as if nothing had happened. The guests watched her, some with open mouths, others with heads bowed, the weight of the night settling over them.